We're still one of the only people, if not the only one. I've looked at like a couple of the other, aggregators per se on the perpetual side, and really what they offer is, the ability to trade out of like a single user interface rather than actually routing and splitting your order across like multiple venues. And so I think that helps us like kind of get that leg in the door, help gain new users, right? And kind of retain users as well, because that is very, that has differentiated our product from others, right?
Welcome to Trailblazers. Today I'm here with Barrett from Ranger Finance. Barrett, can you kind of give us an introduction of yourself and
Yeah,
what you're working on at Ranger Finance?
yeah. A little bit about me. I've been in Solana ecosystem for a number of years now. I started in like early 2021. A little bit before that, I was like a data scientist and engineer, general math and finance background. Then, built some pre-IPO dexes back in 2021 on Solana. Done, run liquidator bots, market making bots. Um, you know, Doing a bunch of general trading on chain for perps and spot. And that's kind of like how Ranger started, is, identifying a need for, trade optimization, like Jupiter accomplished for spot, but for perpetuals, right? Back in 2023 and 4, perp liquidity wasn't like super great on Solana, and you can get a lot of benefit from an aggregator helping like optimize those, executions for your traders, right? And that's kind of like how Ranger started. What Ranger is today, right, is kind of a general purpose trading terminal for both perps and spot. We actually just launched vaults today, which is pretty cool. And then what really lies behind like our perp side of things is our SOR, and that ability to help route trades to optimize that execution price, whether that's on a single venue or multiple venues, right?
Yeah. Can you kind of talk about the problems you noticed in perp liquidity and what kind of compelled you to build Ranger in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, like, generally speaking, like, there on Solana, right, there was just like not like a ton of liquidity for markets, right? So like if you were trying to trade in size, it just wasn't really doable. And so, to help alleviate that problem that not a single venue had enough liquidity for traders, right? We, built like a routing engine, right? So it can split orders across like multiple venues to help optimize that execution price based off like fees, price impact, etc. And that like really stemmed from just trading like on our own. You know, I love derivatives, I love perps, I love trading, and so was just doing a bunch, and was just like, this is kind of like a pain point, for myself, and was just kind of working on something kind of personally, and then one of my now co-founders, Fautu, like hit me up and he's like, hey, like thinking about building like a perps aggregator, and I was like, well, that's seemingly pretty convenient. And then what was the follow up question? Sorry.
Uh, just what problem were you guys trying to solve kind of building this thing, or what did you notice while I guess trading yourself that kind of compelled you to kind of do it?
Yeah. Just like that we could that we could like truly get better execution if we routed to like multiple venues, right? Like I said, like spot aggregation really took off on Solana for similar reasons, right? Like you can help the end user get a better fill, and that same concept can be applied to perpetuals. And so that's kind of like why we set out to do it. There wasn't like anybody that was building a perps aggregator on Solana, and I think even like currently we still remain like one of the, if not the only one that actually does like true aggregation where, an order can get routed to multiple dexes.
Yeah. Can you kind of break down the SOR and kind of how you guys think about routing orders and kind of what are the like variables you take into account when choosing maybe versus Jupiter or Drift or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, the big ones are, your fees that a user has to pay, price impact from that order, right? And then also, the actual price, that global price of, the different dexes, right? Some dexes have premiums, some dexes, are just straight off the Oracle plus price impact, right? Depends on if they're an order book or whatnot. One thing that we don't consider right now for the SOR that, we have, talked to a number of traders and are trying to figure out how to exactly get into the SOR is like funding rates. Obviously, funding rates are important where if they're super high, right? You may not want to open on that DEX, or it depends on your time frame for your trade. And that's something that we have, talked to traders about for a while now, and, interested to see what we can craft and design to make funding rates actually applicable and useful in the terms of like the SOR, right? Whether that's like parameterizing some things for users to, indicate like a time frame, right? So, or like declare that, hey, like I care about funding rate or I don't care about funding rate due to, their personal like choice on like the trade setup, right? So, kind of like enabling that sort of customization aspect is how, I see and we see like being able to get like funding rate in there as well.
Yeah, because I don't know, thinking about like aggregating perp venues is it's not quite as simple as aggregating like spot, and you guys are doing kind of spot as well. How would you kind of compare those two different processes?
I mean, for spot, right? Like we originally started with meta aggregation, just aggregating, Jupiter, Camino for limit orders, DFlow, etc. Right? But now we've kind of like switched to just using like Titan on the spot side, right? Like their team is very focused. The aggregators on the spot side are very focused on solving like spot aggregation issues, and we see like our time better spent, really tackling that application layer as well as perps, the perp side of things for our users, right? So we don't really like focus like too much on like optimizing like spot aggregation, other than like, hey, like is it better to use Titan? Is it better to use Jupiter? Is it better to do meta aggregation, right? And so those are kind of things like we have thought about, but mostly just want to provide like the best experience that we can for spot trading, given that we're mostly focused on optimizing like perps, right? Yeah.
Are you thinking of, I guess this wouldn't be on the near term roadmap, but are you guys ever thinking of integrating like prediction markets or any aggregation of that sort of stuff into that?
Definitely. I think that, prediction markets are really interesting. I think that they are one of the, products currently in crypto that has really been able to attract your, traditional Web2 audience. And I think that that's something that, anybody that's like looking at building like consumer finance products, right, should pay attention to, right? And again, if people are going to trade them and they want it to be part of their portfolio, or at least some sort of subset, some strategies, right? We should definitely be able to offer that. We should want to offer that, right? The more features, I think that you enable for users is generally better, as long as you're still maintaining like that high quality application experience, right? But yes, so to answer your question, I mean, we're definitely thinking about it. I think that we would just want to make sure that it's done in the correct way.
Yeah, totally. So I don't know, the trading kind of front end plus aggregation space is pretty like cutthroat. So how do you guys think about, I guess, gaining and keeping market share in this space?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think for gaining and keeping market share, right? We again, we're still one of the only people, if not the only one. I've looked at like a couple of the other, aggregators per se on the perpetual side, and really what they offer is, the ability to trade out of like a single user interface rather than actually routing and splitting your order across like multiple venues. And so I think that that helps us like kind of get that leg in the door, help gain new users, right? And kind of retain users as well, because that is very, that has differentiated our product from others, right? Now going forward, I think that like I share, this opinion with, maybe some other people, is that generally software, is the tech is less and less of a moat every day, with, the ability for people to rapidly prototype, with, agents, as well as, there's high quality talent entering the ecosystem all the time in crypto, right? So if somebody wants to set out and like build something, they will eventually be able to do it, right? So that first mover advantage, I think, is gives you like a good lead, but then you still have to like continue to execute as a team, and provide like a really good app experience, right? I think there's like a lot of ability on the design space, and that's really where you can differentiate yourself from, like all else being equal at some point in time, right? On that, like the technical side of things, there'll always be slight preferences on tech, the direction in which, an optimization may be made or whatnot. And you can still, maybe eke out some sort of like alpha against like another aggregator, right? We're watching it happen, with Jupiter and Titan and DFlow. And I think that, eventually you're going to get to where they're all comparable, and how you differentiate is that design space, that product experience, right, that you've crafted for your user. And that's really, I think, like where moats can be made, and like retention is truly going to be drawn upon.
So you're really thinking about making it a place where somebody wants to click in and look at their whole portfolio. It really is about how the user feels when they're using your app.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously the product needs to be good, right? Like the
Yeah,
tech for, aggregation has to be top tier. And so that's not what I'm saying. Like, yeah. So, but at the end of the day, like, as time trends on and, I think everybody can and will compete on tech to some degree. That design space, that product experience is really where, moats will be made, and people will be like, hey, like I like this experience. I don't like that experience. Right. And that's where a lot of user retention will be, in the future. And obviously, like, the faster you iterate and continuously add and improve the product, right, you will always, you will still be, potentially steps ahead, on like the actual tech front. And that can also help like with added moats or continued user retention and gaining new users. But again, I think the design space is something that is very, left behind in crypto, and like product user experience. I think generally, hasn't been like super great from crypto apps at large, and is really where a lot of benefit and a lot of traction and retention can be again generated.
yeah. Switching topics a little bit, you guys just announced that you're launching your token on MetaDAO. So can you talk about kind of, I guess, the mechanics of your token and then why you kind of made the decision to launch on MetaDAO?
Yeah. Like general mechanics of the token, it's going to be an ownership coin, at the end of the day, right? And so, the DAO will kind of like decide what those are. I think the beauty about what MetaDAO has created with ownership tokens, is that you don't necessarily have to immediately start like buying back and burn on like this revenue meta that has been happening, because the DAO actually owns the rights to the revenue, the IP, the treasury, right? It provides like token holder protections that have not really, been brought forward by any other mechanism. Not to say that they couldn't, right? But in general, you don't really see kind of traditional mechanism where there's like a foundation, that owns like a bunch of tokens. You don't really see a lot of like tied to, you know, all of the revenue that the company has ever created or will ever create, like back to that token or back to an entity that at least owns the token or is responsible for the token, right? And that alignment of piece, I think, is really, crucial, and I think is actually MetaDAO's like biggest quote innovation, as opposed to like Futarchy. I like Futarchy; it's really cool, but I think the ownership, token itself is really what has set MetaDAO apart, right? And one of the big reasons that I wanted, Ranger wants to launch, on MetaDAO. Obviously, I've been a part of like the MetaDAO ecosystem for a long time. I met Profit and Colin over 2 years ago, I think, at this point. And again, like it makes the most sense. I like the idea of getting buy-in from the community, at like a very good valuation. I think, that provides healthy, understanding and growth prospects, for the company and the token, and that again that alignment, between the fact that like the team can't just walk away with treasury or any of the revenue, right? It all goes back to the team, or all goes back to the token, entity itself, and the fact that that controls like the IP, it alleviates a lot of stress, enables for more comfortability on owning these DeFi tokens, or much more out on the risk curve alt assets, right?
So, I mean, the token is a pretty exciting thing coming up for you guys, but maybe other than the token, what is like exciting coming up on like the product side for you guys?
Like one of the big things, was the release of vaults, and I think that was like something that we were pretty excited about. Other than that, like we obviously are working on a number of new integrations, for, the perp side of things, getting like new dexes involved. There's a number of, dexes coming out on Solana, which we're super excited to integrate and support. There's some stealth ones. I'm, excited for what BAM and Harmonic are going to be able to, do MCP and MCL, from Solana Core, right? I think that those are going to provide like a lot of benefits to Solana, enabling perps to be a lot better and a lot more competitive than they are today, right? Which I'm pretty excited about. And that obviously benefits Ranger, right? Helps, our users get better fills at the end of the day, better liquidity on Solana. And that's great. And then like additionally from that, right? I think there was some stuff talked about, in the article that I put out, about like, we're thinking about prime brokerage services, how, we can, enable more capital efficiency for traders. And I think that that's going to be something that, we're excited to work on, in 2026. I think that that's like obviously a lot more long-term focused. And there are some other like new product stuff that we are excited that, redesigns, getting, a mobile app out. I think that, those are some of the things that, weren't really in that like article that we released, but are definitely excited to continue to push out. I think that, again, I reiterate, like the design space is like wide open and can be improved a lot, especially at Ranger, right? Like the app is in nowhere, like in its in state, and excited to roll out new product features, new components, new mechanisms on the UI, right? That we believe are going to help enable that growth to get those new users that are not crypto natives, right? They're traditional Web2 users, people that may be trading on like an E-Trade account, a Fidelity account, right? Or Robinhood, centralized exchanges, right? Getting them into DeFi, getting them more familiar, making their life a lot easier to navigate and abstract that like chain away effectively.
So it sounds like you guys are pushing on all fronts here. Zooming out a little bit, I guess to not directly what you're working on Ranger, but like what kind of things in the crypto industry have you excited right now, and what things have you like not so excited right now?
What has me excited? I mean, I think the open conversation about like ownership tokens versus traditional tokens. I think that's like pretty exciting. I think if crypto really wants to move to be more than this like nascent thing on the application side of things, right? Obviously, like Bitcoin has hit some pretty big like institutional adoption. Privacy, Zcash stuff is gaining a lot of traction right now. But I think that if we are not able to show that there is value in these tokens, right, then there is no reason that this industry will exist, right? If there are no tokens, DeFi doesn't exist, right? And I think that conversation needs to be had, and it's really starting to like ramp up on Twitter, in like offline chats as well. So very excited about that conversation. I think that again, we're starting to also see a lot of innovation on the design space that hasn't really been seen in the past. Rails that were not previously there are now in place, enabling these DeFi applications to provide more of that Web2 feel, right? And I think that that's like going to go a long way in getting the ability to have a consumer app that somebody that just uses Robinhood, right, would switch over and use, right, and maybe not really necessarily know that they're utilizing like a ton of crypto rails, right? And I think that abstraction on the app layer is finally getting to a point, and that's really cool as well to see. Obviously, like we are like working on like a lot of that stuff on like the app layer and abstraction, trying to help bridge that gap. But I think like the most important piece that's like going on, or the most important discussion right now, is the like ownership token versus like traditional token model, and like what that really means for crypto companies and applications as like time goes on.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap things up. Thank you for coming on and sharing what you're working on at Ranger.
Yeah, man. Jack, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to seeing you here soon in February.
Yeah.
All right, my man.